Hey there guys, this is Greg from NFG. So we've been kind of tossing around the idea of doing a timing video. And rather than sitting here messing around with a gun, I figured it would be easier to kind of explain what's going on. What's going on in the gun when, when you're trying to adjust the timing. How exactly does it work? Every autococker is a little bit different, so the timing is going to be a little bit different. It's going to be based on, yes, Waldo, the 7-Man Masters, the WTS, 2 great tournament series out there. Yes, NFG will be on site there. We'll be teching guns and have some swag there and some other stuff, so we will be there. It's going to be at Cousins Paintball in Manchester, New Jersey, so good stuff. Make sure to get there. Yeah, we're just waiting on the springs, Justin. That thing should... I want to get that thing out of here. I'm tired of looking at it. I'm sorry. That gun, I hate it. Anyway, so we've been talking about doing a timing video, and yeah, I mean, I could sit here and time a gun and say, oh yeah, hey look, it's working, this is the adjustments to make, but I don't necessarily know that it's going to convey, I don't think it's going to convey the importance of what of each of the adjustments. So what I'm doing here is I want to try and explain exactly what's going on. So for the purposes of this video, we're going to focus on the internals, and then we're going to talk about the 3-way, okay? And once we get through that, then, we'll probably, maybe we can, if we have time and if I have battery life, maybe we will dive into, maybe we'll time a gun, but we'll see. So anyway, so, hey, let's get started. So, anyway, so when you're timing an autococker, there's a, that's right, Waldo. Just send it here with a sack of cash and we'll get it singing for you. So anyway, I kind of lost my train of thought here. I forgot what I was going to say. Thanks, Waldo. Anyway, so the first part that we're going to talk about is going to be the internals. And I think what we all need to understand is, exactly what happens. If you guys go back to one of our earlier videos, we talked about just an overview of the parts and how they all interact. So if you have not watched that, it's going to be a good idea to watch that if you're not already familiar with how things are working. So, so let's dive into it. And this is not to scale, so just so you know. So what you're looking at here is a representation of a trigger plate and a sear assembly. Man, this seems really long. Hang on a second. Let me make some adjustments here. That's how we adjust it. There we go. That'll work. Let me put a new pivot point here too, just so you kind of understand what's going on here. Don't pay attention to that one with the X on it. Anyway, so on the lower side, there are there's basically 4 components that kind of comprise the timing, okay? First, you have the trigger plate, which is right here, and it's just a wedge. And the reason it's a wedge is because trigger plates have a wedge on it. And let me see, I have a whole stack of them here somewhere. Ah, here we go. So if you look here, you can see that little ramp. So right here, this is what's important right here, is that little ramp. And that's what this little wedge here is going to represent, is that ramp. Now, depending on the type of trigger plate, some of those ramps can be can have a more gradual kind of angle. Some of them have a harsher angle. This is a stock inception plate, so this has a kind of a snappy feel to it, because it has this kind of I don't want to say harsh, but it has a more intense ramp than like an old school style plate, which would be more gradual. So anyway, so to begin at the beginning, the first step that we're going to do is when you shoot an autococker, you pull the trigger, right? So what happens is we have our pivot point here. As you pull the trigger, it pushes this plate onto the sear. Well, it goes kind of underneath the front edge of the sear. Man, this is really, really sharp. I guess I should probably clean that up, but whatever. And as this goes, this is going to pivot at the pivot point here and begin to pull the back end down. Now, over here, we have our hammer, and then we have our lug here. Now, what is going to dictate when the hammer falls, or when the hammer actually drops? So when you pull the trigger and it goes boom, what exactly dictates that is this lug adjustment combined with the angle of your trigger plate, right? So say we have a frame with a forward and rear adjustment, we can push that trigger in, and it's going to bring this sear down. So your sear starting position is going to vary based on what your forward travel is going to be. All right. So as we pull that trigger, this is going to tilt down, and then this is kind of the point on the sear, right? This is going to point. This is going to pivot downward, and then once this gets to a point, it's going to release the lug from the sear, and then the hammer is going to move forward. It's going to hit the valve, and your cocking cycle should start to pull it back, and then it's going to reset over the sear. So when you're timing an autococker, your biggest decision, at least in my opinion, is how you want this lug set, okay? Now, I wouldn't, now if we were, actually timing a gun here, I wouldn't set the lug all the way down. But because then you're going to be shooting all the way at the back of your trigger pull. So, the further down this lug is set, the further back in the pull the release is going to be. So if we set this all the way to the bottom, which would be, I don't know how many turns that would be off the top of my head, then the sear has to travel the entire length of the point before it releases the hammer. Okay? Now, usually what I try to do is I try to time it so there's a little bit of, so you have a little bit of a little bit there to make sure that it catches reliably. Because if you have it set too shallow, the hammer can just glide right over. So it might start to catch, but then it'll push the sear down, and then it'll just kind of go. So you want to make sure that you have it far enough down that it can reliably catch on the sear. And when you're timing your gun, you want to check that repeatedly. You want to go ahead and make sure that that it's catching. And probably the best way to do that, at least when you're initially timing it, is push on that timing rod. If you can push on the timing rod and it releases, or not the timing rod, the cocking rod, if you push on that and it releases, you need to add more lug to it. Okay, it should have a good firm. It should have a really good firm latch on that sear. Okay, so if you look, that's not going to go in anywhere. All right. Now, so you have your sear. Now, if you want to have a quicker shot and you want to have it pull at the very beginning, and you want to have a drop at the very beginning of the pull, you want to move up. So you're going to set your hammer, lug higher. If you want it to shoot toward the middle, you want it to go lower. And if you want it to shoot more toward the back, you want to go even lower still. So you have a lot of adjustability. And one of the things that you really want to keep in mind is that when you're talking in terms of a hammer, a little bit goes a long way. So, you know, a quarter turn, anytime you're setting your lug, I recommend doing like a quarter turn and seeing how it works out, and, you know, making sure that the trigger pulls right, make sure that the sear catches, okay? So that is, so that in a nutshell is what's going on between your hammer, your trigger plate, and your sear assembly, okay? Now, obviously there's springs in there, and those tensions and all those other things are gonna influence, you know, exactly how, you know, how it's gonna do. Like if you have a really heavy hammer spring and you have a really light sear spring, then it's very likely that you're gonna need more lug to ensure that it just doesn't glide right over. So it doesn't just glide right over when it tries to catch, okay? Because this spring will exert force against the sear, and it can push it down. So, so that's kind of that. So let's take a quick couple minutes here. Let's see if anybody has any questions. It does take a lot of patience. So does anybody have any questions on that part of what's going on? Somebody, anybody? Okay. If we have a question, then we'll circle back to it in a little bit, right? So the next thing I want to talk about is the three-way and how that functions. So we'll set our super awesome props aside, and we're going to get out my super awesome three-way model here. I spent a lot of time on the three-way model. It's very, very accurate. It's awesome. It's really not. It's an envelope. Because we're low budget here. So, oh shoot. I wanted to put O-rings on this, but I forgot. Anyway, so let's talk about the three-way, right? So we're gonna go down here like this. All right, can you guys see that? Can you see the lines on there? Let me get this up a little further. All right, so I'm going to assume, since nobody's saying you can't see it, that I'm going to assume you can see it. So let's talk about it. So let's assume that this is a three-way, okay? This is going to be the shaft side. So this is the shaft. So this is where that three-way is going to come in from the plate, right? And then this is going to be the front. I can't write upside down. All right. So now what happens with a three-way is, so we're going to have our shaft at rest. And for the sake of argument, let's assume that we have a, let's assume that we have a, we'll assume we have a three O-ring three-way here, okay? So, all right, let me put an O-ring on this thing. Where did I put my O-rings? My bench is a mess right now. I guess a black one will work, right? All right. So if we have a three O-ring three-way, like like an Inception or a Bomb or something like that, the way this thing is going to work, and it's going to function similarly with a two O-ring three-way. The concept is just slightly different. So exactly what's going to happen here is when this guy is at rest, okay, you are going to have, so this is going to be your input hole, right? This is what's coming from the LPR. And then, this is so hard to think about when it's upside down. This is what's going to the rear of the ram, right here. And then this side is what's going to go to the front of the ram, right? So what happens is when you pull the trigger, the timing rod, which is connected to the trigger plate and the three-way shaft, you're going to pull the trigger. This is going to move back. All right. If you're doing a hinge, it's going to go to the front, and then this and this is going to be reversed. But no matter what, this is always an air out hole. These two smaller squares here, these are going to represent the vents. But basically, when you pull the trigger, what happens is the input right now is going from the LPR over here to the outlet to the rear of the ram. Now, when we pull the trigger, this is going to move to the other side of that hole, and it's going to switch the supply from the rear of the three-way to the, or from the rear of the ram over to the front of the ram. And then what happens is that is what pushes the ram back. That's what cocks the gun. And then when you release the trigger, this moves forward again, and then the air supply goes back to here, and then that fills up the pressure in the back of the ram and pushes the plunger forward and closes the bolt, and that is your cocking cycle. So when it's like this, air's going to the front, the ram pushes back, and in turn, when the ram pushes back, it grabs the cocking rod, which is attached to the hammer, pulls the hammer back over the sear, the gun cocks, and then you move it forward. That air goes back, goes to the front of the, or goes to the rear of the ram, pulls the back block forward, the cocking rod stays put, and the gun should remain cocked if you have your lug set correctly, okay? So that in a nutshell is how a three-way works. So you have airflow, that you have your supply, and then you basically have a choice of two vents. And depending on the type of frame, you're going to you might have to adjust this. If you're using a two O-ring three-way, then you're going to reverse these. If you're using a 3 O-ring three-way, you're going to back to back, front to front. Unless you're using a hinge, then it's all reversed. But Simon actually was super cool and made a chart that kind of says, hey, this is how you set all these things up, so it's nice and easy. But if you ever set your autococker up and no matter what you do, you can't get it to, the cocking blocks back, just try switching your hoses and see if you can get it to work. So that in a nutshell is the relationship, not the relationship, the function that's going on within the three-way. All right. So when you're timing a gun, the key to doing that is making sure that you have that relationship between the lug, the plate setting, which in a lot of frames you don't have adjustability in the plate setting. So it's going to be in one spot at start. Yeah, you can shim it or whatever, but that's where it's going to start. And then on the flip side of that, you have you have the hammer lug that is going to control at what point in the cycle the hammer is going to drop. So how do you know? So now you understand. You know how the three-way works. You know what's going on between the trigger plate and the hammer. How do you know what's going on in the gun, and how do you know that it's going to work right? So let's take a look here, and exactly what we're going to do is I want you to look at that. I want you to look here. All right. So right here is where it's important. So let's assume, so basically what you cock the gun, right? And you can do this, you don't need air to do this. What I do is I take my finger, and this is kind of hard to do backwards, but I stick my finger in there and I pull this trigger ever so slowly, as slowly as I can, and I watch that end of the timing rod that goes through the end of the timing rod that goes through the plate, and I watch that ever so much. And what I'm looking for when I do that is I want to make sure that that hammer drops before the three-way actuates. All right, so we're going to do that, and we're going to pull it real slow. Boom. And then you can see we have a really good three-way actuation. This is an older frame. This doesn't have the forward and rear adjustment stops. So, you know, we got a lot of travel, so it's a pretty good, I don't know, visual aid to do. So let's put some air to this and let's see if it's timed, right? And I was messing with this earlier. I don't remember if I retimed it or not, but we're gonna give it a whirl. So put our handy dandy muffler on there. Hang on here. Maybe I'm not going to be able to do that. What the heck? Oh, there it goes. Oh. Oh, hold on. Got to put it back together. I don't know my own strength. It actually kind of hurt a little bit. It's kind of funny how stuff goes wrong in these videos when you're doing it. You're trying to look all smart, and then you have like stuff doing stupid stuff that it normally doesn't do. All right. Now we got it. All right. So let me air this guy up. I'm going to cock it first, just because that's what you do when you got an autococker or a pump gun. You make sure that you got it cocked, right? And power it up. And let's see if it's timed, all right? Ooh, it's beautiful. So anyway, so this is a good gun to look at this on because everything's working the way it should. So now what we're gonna do now that we have air on this, our gun is cocked, we know that. We're going to pull this ever so slowly. We're gonna hear the hammer drop right there, right? And then right there, we have our cocking cycle start. And if you look, the back block is all the way back. It pushed the cocking rod back, and I'm gonna pull the trigger forward, and our cocking rod stays back, okay? So do that again. Let's take a look. So you can see it. Hammer drops, cocking cycle starts, cocking cycle stops, all right? And then you're back to reset. And then you have that, and you get a working autococker. Now, once you have this to where you have your sear reliably set and it's dropping at a point that you like it, because there's no right or wrong, right? You can have your sear set more to the front, you can have it set more to the middle, more toward the back, however you like it. The only thing that you really need to pay attention to is your hammer drops before your cocking cycle starts. And with all the different plates out there, and the fact that you can buy a Dremel and grind a plate away to however you want it, that really makes it, you have so much adjustability in what your trigger looks like. I had one that came in where it did nothing. It had this big, long, sloppy pull at the front, and then by the time it got to the back, it was timed really close. But it really shot nice. I mean, it was definitely a nice way to do it. So I do like this gun. I might have to keep it. Maybe not. I would like to sell it, but so yeah, so anyway, before I got my thought train got derailed there. So you have the relationship between the three-way actuation and the hammer dropping. You always want your hammer to drop first, and then you want your three-way to begin actuation. Now, once you have that lug set where you like it, then you're going to adjust the three-way. Now, what's nice about the Inception three-ways is that you can do it right here. You just take your Allen key, you stick it in the front, you're like, just turn it, you know, if you want it to go one way, or if you want it, you turn it in if you want your trigger pull to come forward, or if you want that, not the trigger pull, but if you want the three-way actuation to come forward, you turn it counterclockwise if you want to move it back, and then you can put that wherever you want it. And once you understand exactly how all these parts kind of work together, timing a gun really isn't, it's not that hard. So it's just a matter of making sure that your timing follows the very simple rule of hammer drop, then actuate the three-way. And you can have that as almost as far apart almost as you like. Some guys like to have a long pull, and you have a gap where, I mean, it's just basically you're just pulling the trigger and nothing's going on, and then it hits the three-way and then it recocks. Some guys like to bring it closer. When I do the super short trigger pulls on the SST pulls with the Inception frame and the Inception three-way and all that, I get those things timed so close. I mean, it's like there's a sea hair in between when that hammer drops and it starts cycling again. So now if you're not careful and you can get that kind of backwards where you have that where you have the pneumatic cycling before the bolt, you're going to know. It's going to sound off. You're not going to have a nice clean pop like this. You're going to have a what's the word? It's almost like a hollow sound, or well, not hollow. I don't know. It's hard to explain. You just know the sound as you're doing it. It's a different sound. You can hear when the gun's shooting right, and you can not. So I guess it's just one of those things. You just have to kind of do it and learn what the sounds are. I don't think that Facebook Live is really going to convey what those sounds are. So now, one other thing when it comes to timing that I want to talk about is setting the LPR. All right. So let's talk about the LPR for a minute. So on this guy, we're going to crank this out. And this isn't hard. My shoulder is just a mess. I did something to it. So, like, you're getting old. All right, so the LPR is out, right? So guess what? It's not doing anything. Now, I can see a lot of guys sending guns in, and they complain about, it's shooting, it shoots really rough. It's, it's got blowback. It's got whatever. And a lot of that stuff is just, can be, a lot of those weird performance issues, a lot of times can just be the LPR. So when you have the LPR and you're setting it, all you want to do is you pull the trigger, you make an adjustment, you turn it in, and then you're going to hear your three-way leak, right? And then it'll get to a pressure where it's going to seat all the O-rings in the three-way, so you know you're at half the battle there, right? Now let's see, are we ready? No, we're not pushing it back far enough. So we need to add a little bit of pressure. So a little bit more pressure, quarter turns. Okay, so that's that sound I was talking about. You hear that slapping sound? So we need to add more pressure. And then if you listen, so right there is what you want. So it's that more muffled sound, which means that your air is going through the bolt and it's getting, pushed down the barrel instead of coming out your feed neck. But a lot of those little issues can be caused just by your LPR pressure. And a lot of guys, they'll have this thing cranked all the way in, and you don't want to do that. Your gun's not going to shoot nice. It's not going to like it, okay? On the Inception ones, on the V1 LPRs, I really liked them because the right pressure, it was turned all the way in. So it was essentially on or off. If you had it too low, then you would know and you would crank it up a little bit more. But then by the time it got to the very end, it was at the perfect pressure. The gun cycled great. It was reliable. It was easy to tell people how to fix it. But a lot of guys didn't like that for whatever reason. And so Simon changed it and he made the V2, which now has more adjustability. So you can overpressurize your pneumatics. Yay! I mean, I guess, the customer is always right except when they're wrong, right? But I mean, I guess there are certain instances where you have 3-ways that need a higher pressure. I think the bomb 3-way, I know that they, like the O-rings don't seat until you get a little bit more pressure in there with the bombs, at least the ones that I've had. I've seen some ANS 3-ways that do that too. So, but yeah, that's exactly what you're looking for. That sound right there, nice and smooth, and you can feel it. You can really feel the difference between an LPR that's set properly and one that's set too high, because this back block is really going to slam around. You're gonna feel it when you're shooting it. So, so yeah. Hey, what's up, Mr. Sneed? How you doing, bro? So that, in a nutshell, is how to time an autococker. That is the, kind of the nuts and bolts of how it's done and the concepts behind it. So let's open it up. Let's have some questions. You guys have to have questions because this is a giant mystery. Nobody can time their own autococker. So, what questions do you have? No questions? I don't know what was going on with this thing. It just wouldn't pop earlier, and now it seems to be working fine. I don't know. I love these ASAs. These are so great. And I'm not just saying that because, Simon's my buddy, but these are where it's at, man. I remember the old days, you'd be like unscrewing, and you're like, oh man, when's this thing gonna vent? When's this thing gonna vent? Or the really old ASAs, the ones that didn't have a vent hole in them, and you would literally like unscrew and be like, boom! But yeah, these are great. So easy. I thought the pops were like the best ones, but the easy ASA is so much better. This guy. I guess I didn't have this guy. Yeah, the CCM ones are brutal. They have like that little knob. And if you have a tank, like if you're stuck using like an 800 out tank, oh my God. I mean, luckily I keep my tanks where they're, I keep my tanks at 550, so it's never that bad. But man, you get something that has a lot of pressure on it, it's like, really trying to get those off. So, oh, you have one that actually works properly? I find the older ones really work nice. I guess they have to get broken in a little bit before they really work good. But yeah, I mean, and I love CCM. I love their guns. But the ASA could be a little bit better on them. But it's an old school gun. I like them. I like that. It's got a little bit. It adds a little bit of charm to it. So the Bob Long ASAs are nice. The gear drives, those are freaking nice. Every time I have a Bob Long and I'm like, it just has that. Oh, those are really nice. But you can't beat the Inception because you're all like, yeah, let's rock, let's shoot some fools, boom, and you're ready to go. That makes you feel like you have a set of brass balls this big when you're like, boom, let's rock, So, all right, so I guess we can kind of sit here and shoot the breeze a little bit while if anybody has any questions or anything like that, you'll find out soon enough. I hope so. Get crack-a-lackin', bro. So I'll just give it a few minutes and see if anybody has anything that they want to ask. Oh, I guess we're only down to 4 people. I guess I'm not terribly entertaining. I know I'm ugly, so that's why I try and keep it like more down, you know, pointing more down toward the tech bench than at my face. But yeah. Trying to think of something I can talk about to kill the time. I was going to talk about the cool stuff Ginger Dynamics sent me the other day. Well, actually, it was like a couple weeks ago. But they sent me a pneumatics cover and a couple of hopper covers. And here's one that they sent. This is for a Revy, right? So this kind of fits over and covers the battery, right? Really cool. I don't have a Revy handy. Hey, no problem, Jay. Did I get a new free flow? I did not, unfortunately. I really want one, but unfortunately the needs of the business come before the desires of the owners. So, you know, I opted to invest in stock for some upcoming events. So hopefully, I'm gonna talk to Buddy and see if maybe he can slide one in for me. Yeah, I need to be responsible and not buy yet another paintball gun. But I really want one. I really do. They're super hot. So, but anyway, so back to Ginger Dynamics. So they make a bunch of cool stuff. They make pneumatic covers. They make hopper covers, and I think they had some barrel covers listed on their price list too. But you can check them out. I guess it's gingerdynamics.com. Their stuff is really nice. The printing on their neoprene is really nice, and it's a nice, thick, really stretchy neoprene. It seems very durable. I'm excited to try it out. So thank you to Gus Lackertis for sending this stuff over. I'm gonna go find a Revy in my basement. I'm gonna put this on here so I'm not just flopping this thing around. I have my rotor and stuff all packed up. I was gonna go play last weekend, and I just never got around to it. Yeah, man, that's rough. Having the car in the shop. That's like, oh my God, the timing. Yeah. Yeah, hopefully, hopefully I can move some of the backlog I got here in the next few hours, so I can sneak in and grab a caliber. But we'll see. If I get it, I get it. If not, I mean, it's not like I don't have a stack of nice guns. I just really want one. Really want one. Oh, I hate being responsible. So what else do we want to talk about? Is there anything else you guys want to see? Anything else you want to talk about besides missing out on the super cool free flow buy? Tax time, buy a gun. Yeah, that's assuming I'm going to get a return. I don't think I'm going to be getting a return this year. So, I mean, I have to file a return. I'm not going to get any money back. I doubt it. Last year I was amazed. I got like $50 back, and I was like, woohoo! But honestly, from my perspective, I'm a big fan of writing a check when it comes tax time, because then the government does not have my money. And so basically, like, when you get a tax return, you're giving the government your money and you're not earning interest on it. I would rather have my money in my pocket so I can use it for stuff like paintball guns. So, yeah, that's my belief when it comes to taxes. Pay them. Don't be like Al Capone and get thrown in jail for tax evasion, but, don't overpay them. Anything else we want to talk about? Anything else we want to see? Do we want to talk about springs? Do we want to talk about springing? I have some time here that we got through the timing part a lot faster. I really assumed there was going to be more questions on timing, but I guess not. Thanks, Tim. I'm glad you like them. Yeah, we've been getting some pretty positive feedback with them. So, yeah, so NFG, we do have spring kits available now. I forget if they're in this toolbox or the other one. I think they're in the other toolbox. The one below the one I'm in. Yeah, they're in the other one. But yeah, we have spring kits. It's a bag of springs. Really, really cool. Springing and valves next. That's a pretty good idea, actually. Oh, no, that's not. Oh, I got one. Here we go. Boom. NFG spring kit. Yay. So, I'm checking to see if I robbed one out of here. This is my... No, this is a complete one. Let's take a look at it, right? Let me set that down. Actually, let me put the barrel on so I don't misplace it. Set that over there. So, this is the NFG spring kit. So basically the reason we kind of did this is because we go through so many freaking springs. It's just easier to have our own in stock. So what you get with the NFG spring kit is you get a bunch of springs. Ta-da! Woohoo! Springs. But no, what you're going to get is you're going to get a series of different weight springs. So the way this works is the green ones are